Well, good afternoon, folk, and it's time for another session of mathematical literacy. Absolutely, okay? So you can forget about all the hard times you've had today. You can forget about all the rubbish you've done, like science and maths and geography. It's time for maths literacy, okay? The good stuff. Now, today what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be focusing on the whole topic of graphs. Okay? And remember, folk, and you've got to remember this, that no matter what section of work we are doing, they're all equally important. Now, graph work can count up to 25% of your final matric examination. You have to know how to do it. So let's look at our very first slide. And our very first slide here shows us the type of things that we have to know how to do. So first of all, with graph, we have a little checklist. And our checklist is telling us this, that number one, we have to be able to draw graphs. Okay? Now, guys, we say you have to be able to draw graphs. You've got to be able to draw those graphs with the use of a table for paper one. But there's nothing to stop an examiner giving you some sort of information that you've got to interpret, and with that interpretation then put it into a type of formula. And then from that formula, draw an actual graph. Okay, an examiner is allowed to do that, especially with paper two. But with paper one, what we're saying is you've got to be able to draw a graph using a table of data. Right. Now, the next thing we've got to be able to do is we have to be able to interpret different types of graphs. And this is important, folk, the interpretation of those graphs. And usually the interpretation comes in a paper two. It can come in a paper one, where we ask you simple, basic little facts about the graph. But when it comes to interpreting, that's normally in a paper two, where we say, why do you think this is happening? Or what do you suppose would happen if that happened? Okay? So you're looking at your graph and you're coming up with a full interpretation. But in paper one, we can ask you some very basic little concepts or basic little questions about the graph that you're actually doing. Okay? So we've got to be able to interpret. And what type of graphs? Well, there are all kinds, hey? You've got to know how to do these line graphs. You've got to be able to understand bar graphs and pie charts. And pie charts and bar graphs normally come under the whole section of statistics. All right? But remember, we are allowed to mingle a bit of graph work, a bit of stats, a bit of finance, and come up with a whole final question, mixing everything up. Now, what I'm going to do in this session is we're going to look at a few questions from past paper ones, and then we're also going to look at a question or two from a paper two. So we're going to start looking at very basic little concepts and then make it more and more difficult. Right, let's get started. So, question number one we're going to look at. And folks, from this you can see that it comes from your November 2011 paper, paper one, and it was question 1.3. Now, it's quite a bit of reading, so let's have a look at it. And once we've read the question, I'm then going to show you what I would do to that question if I was answering it in my final matric exam. So let's have a look. So, Facebook and Twitter are two international social networking sites. Individuals can use Facebook and Twitter to communicate with one another via the internet. The following statistics about Facebook and Twitter come from a December 2010 article on the website www.digitalbuzzblock.com. Okay, and these are the facts. Number one, Facebook has 500 million users, of which 230 are male. Twitter, and I'm going to do this in a different color, Twitter, on the other hand, have 106 million users, of which 50,88 million are male. Right. Now, remember I said I'm going to show you what I would do if I was answering this question, and I've actually done it while I read the question. I took a pen, and you would take a marker in the exam. And what I've done is straight away I've made Facebook one color, and Twitter another color. Can you have a look at this? So I've made Facebook all my green, and I've looked at Twitter in orange. Now, in an exam, you've got highlighters, and guys, take highlighters into the exams and use them. Underline, highlight certain things that are important that you are going to need. And there are two things that I've realized that are important in this question. Number one, we're dealing with two different social networking type of communication things. One is Facebook, the other is Twitter. That's fact number one. Fact number two is this, that they're giving us figures, but they're very quick to say, and these figures belong to males. Let's have a look at this. Facebook has 500 million users, of which 230 million are male. Now why would they have told us that? I'm sure they've told us that because somewhere along the lines they're going to ask us about female users. All right? And so straight away I'm defining, hold on, this question is looking at males. So I must be aware that there's another figure that is related to the females. Got that? Okay, so we've looked at Facebook, and we know there's Twitter. We know there are 500 million users on Facebook, of which 230 million are male. Twitter has 106 million users, of which 50,88 million are male. Right, so because we know the male, we can work out the female. How? It's quite simple, eh? We take our total minus the male, and that will give us our female users. And I'm sure that's going to be one of the questions. So now, let's look at our very first question. First question. Calculate the difference between the number of users of the two social networks. Well, that's kind of easy, isn't it? Because all we're going to say is, right, the difference is, and notice it's the total difference. It's not saying the difference in the males or the difference in the females, but the overall difference. So we're going to say, right, here in Facebook, we have 500 million users. So I'm going to say straight away, the difference is going to be 500 million minus 106 million. 106 million. And my answer, and guys, again, let's use the calculator. Why not? Okay? You've got a calculator, use it. So we're going to say, right, I've got 500 minus 106 million equals, and my answer is 394 million. So I've got 394 million is the difference with the number of users that I have. I knew this question was not going to be hard. Why? Because if I look at the question, I can see it was only worth, let's have a look, 2 marks. And I also know, guys, let's admit, it's a paper 1. In paper 1, they're not going to challenge me too much with my thinking process. They just want to make sure, do I have the skills? Do I have the skills to interpret the question? Do I have the skills to do basic little concepts like adding, subtracting, etc.? Okay? And that's exactly what they've tested, and that's what I've answered. Question number 2. It says, sorry, still question 1, but the next part of it. Determine the number of female users of Twitter. Now that's exactly what I said they were going to ask, isn't it? So let's have a look at it. So, Twitter, let's go. We've got 106 million users, of which 50,88 million are male. So the number of female, I'm going to say, well, that's quite easy. I've got 106 million, okay, minus 50,88 million. And again, don't hurt yourself. Let your calculator do the work. So let's do that. We're going to say, right, 106 minus 50.88 equals, and my answer is 55,12. 55,12 what? 55,12 million. Okay. That's the number of females. Guys, this is not hard at all. Let's keep going. Next question. Calculate the percentage of Facebook users that are male. All right, now, whenever I hear the word or see the word percentage, I know that the number 100 has got to fit in there somewhere, because percentage means out of 100, doesn't it? So is percentage 100? Where am I going to find the 100? Well, let's look. The percentage of Facebook users that are male. And if we look at it, we know that we have 230 male. So I'm going to say I've got 230 million over 500 million. I'm going to multiply that by 100 to find out the actual percentage. Okay? Now, do I have to write 230 million? Well, I don't really have to in this case, because both the 230 and the 500,000 are millions. Okay? But if it makes you feel better, write it as millions. Let's do it, in fact. Why not? So I've got 230. How do I do million? I add 6 noughts. There it is. I add 6 noughts. There they are. So now I have 500 million, 230 million times 100. Again, folks, let our calculator do it. Okay? So we're going to say, right, fraction button, 230 million, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, over 500 million. 500, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? Then we're going to multiply that by 100, because we're changing it to a percent, and my answer is 46%. So I have 46%. Okay. Why did I say you don't have to write million? I'll show you why. If you look here carefully, in the good old days when you were a little kid in grade 2 or 3 or even grade 4 or 5, whenever you dealt with fractions, you would always cross out noughts on the top line and on the bottom, didn't you? So if I look at this, if I crossed out these 6 noughts here and I crossed out these 6 noughts here, I haven't changed the sum at all. I've just reduced the top and the bottom line. So the fraction, or the power of that fraction, remains the same. But you know what, guys? If that confuses you, rather write out 230 million. Rather write out 500 million. And then let your calculator do it the way we did it, and you can't go wrong. Cool. Let's move on. Now, my next part of that question says this. Right. Now what we're doing is we're looking at a comparison of users of Facebook and Twitter for December 2010. And what you will now notice is we're putting it on a graph. Let's just have a look at this graph before we even look at the question. Let's have a look at the graph just like you would do in a matric exam. So if I opened up this question in my matric exam, I would look at it and say, right, before I even look at the question, let me make some sort of sense of this graph that's in front of me. Because by making some sort of sense of this graph, it's going to help me answer the questions later on. So let's have a look at this graph. And I'm going to change my color to green. And the reason why I'm not using yellow is because yellow is already on the graph. And you can see that my yellow lines in those special bars represent Facebook. Can you see that? Facebook is represented with the yellow stripes. Now, the clear bars are represented by Twitter. So if you look at the first set of columns over here, you can see that they represent the users who update their status daily. 12% of users on Facebook are updating on a daily basis. Now, if 12% are updating, that means that there's some that don't update every single day. Okay. And what's percentage out of? It's out of 100. So if 12% are updating, that means I've got 88% that are not updating. Do you see how we get that? All right. In the same way, if you look at Twitter here, 52% of people who use Twitter update their status daily, which means 48% of people are not doing this on a daily basis. My next column talks about users who log in via mobile devices. The next set of columns talk about users who log in daily. And the final set of columns are talking about users who located outside the USA. Right. Now we've looked at these graphs, we've tried to make sense of them, and now we're going to look at the actual question. And the first question is, give one example of a mobile device. Well, guys, the first one that comes to mind straight away, to me anyway, is a cell phone. Okay? So a cell phone is a good example of a mobile device. I'm sure you can think of 2 or 3 others. Right, I'm rather old, so I'm not into all this technology. But you young guys who use it on a daily basis, I'm sure you've already got 2 or 3 other examples as well. Right, our next question. Write down the percentage of Facebook users who logged in using mobile devices. So let's go straight up here. Users to log in using mobile devices, we're talking this section over here. And we're talking about those ones who log in with Facebook. And Facebook is represented by yellow, or the yellow column. So we know 30% of users are logging in via mobile devices, or logging into Facebook rather, with a mobile device. Okay. Guys, again, there's nothing difficult about this at all, is there? Of course there's not. And we don't expect it to be difficult. Why? Because we're looking at a paper 1. All the examiner wants to make sure on a paper 1 is, can you make sense of this graph? Don't interpret it, but can you read the different figures? Can you read the different data off that graph? Let's see what they ask in the next part of the question. The next question says this. Calculate the percentage of Facebook users who did not update their status daily. We spoke about that earlier, didn't we? So if we go and look at Facebook, and with Facebook we're looking at our yellow color, if you look there, we see that 12% of users do update daily. So how many don't? Well, a percentage is out of 100. So what we're going to say is we've got 100% minus this 12%. So minus 12%, and again, folk, our calculator would tell us 100 minus 12 is going to give me 88%. Okay. Next question. Determine the number of Twitter users that logged in daily. Okay. The number of Twitter users that logged in daily are going to be over here, and there are 27% of them. Okay, straightforward question, nothing difficult. 27%. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll look at another question. Welcome back, folk. We're busy looking at graph work. We've done a very, very basic question, paper 1 type of question. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do another paper 1 type question. Let's have a look here. It's adapted from the November 2011 paper 1. In other words, it's real life stuff. This came from last year's matric paper. Guys, this is the kind of question that you could be seeing at the end of this very year in your paper. Not the exact same wording, not the exact same graph, but a similar sort of thing along the similar sort of lines. Okay, let's read it. The graph below shows the maximum and minimum temperature of 5 world cities for the 8th of March 2011. Let's have a look at it. It's the maximum and minimum temperatures, and here we got them. Right, so if we look at the 5 cities, you can see we've got Amsterdam, and Amsterdam's showing us 2 different temperatures. There's a temperature down here, and there's a temperature up here. Now, guys, obviously, the minimum temperature is my low temperature, and the maximum temperature must be my higher temperature. You can never have a minimum higher than a maximum, okay? In the same way, you can never have a maximum lower than a minimum. It just wouldn't make any sense at all. So, if we look at this, we can see that Amsterdam had a temperature down here. Oh, that's interesting, because it's lower than 0. And it had a maximum temperature up here, which doesn't seem very high at all. And then we've got temperatures for Harare, for Hong Kong, for London, and for New Delhi. Okay, just a good little idea here. Do what I've done. You'll notice I haven't even looked at the questions yet. All I've done is looked at the resources, getting a good idea of it, and then I'll be in a better position to answer those questions. Right, our very first question now says this. Write down New Delhi's maximum temperature. So let's have a look at it. We know we're dealing with New Delhi. We know its maximum is over here. So what is it? Well, let's have a look. So we know this line over here is 25 degrees. We got 26 degrees, 27 degrees. So New Delhi's maximum temperature, 27 degrees. My next question. Which city had a minimum temperature that was higher than London's maximum temperature? My Gideon. So maximum for London, and then we've actually got a city whose minimum isn't even that low. Right, so let's try and find out. So London is over here, and London has a maximum over there. Right, now we're looking for a town whose minimum is higher than London's maximum. So let's have a look at it. Well, first of all, if we start on this side, we can see that Amsterdam's minimum is way below London's maximum. So London's maximum, if we look at it, is over here. It's 10 degrees. So we're now looking for a minimum that's higher than 10 degrees. Well, Amsterdam is -2. That's not going to help us. Let's have a look here. Here's Harare, and they're at this point here, 14 degrees. Now, 14 degrees as the lowest is still higher than London's higher. Jeez, all this English sounds very confusing, but I'm sure you understand. So if we look at the graph, we're looking for a white dot that's higher than that little yellow dot. And guys, here it is here. It's Harare. I want to point something out to you here because the examiner is trying to trick you. Let's have a look at this. Hong Kong's minimum is also here. It's at 10 degrees. But the question wasn't what country is the same. It was saying what country's minimum is higher than London's maximum, not what's the same. So we can't use Hong Kong because Hong Kong's minimum is the same as London's maximum. Not the same, folk. It wasn't the question. It was higher. So it has to be Harare. Okay? Now that was one little horrible little thing that the examiners put in there to try and test and make sure you understand the difference between the same and higher. But again, there's nothing hugely confusing about this, and we didn't expect it. Why? It's a paper one. Let's move on. Our next question now says this. Which city had the lowest minimum temperature? Well, guys, let's have a look. If we look here, we've got Amsterdam at -2. We've also got London over here, but London are at -1. Amsterdam, -2. So the answer then is Amsterdam. Okay. My goodness, and I tell you what, I've been in Amsterdam in their winter, and it gets really, really cold. So I understand what all this -2 and -1 is about, I can assure you. In fact, sometimes they get lower than -15, -20. It's freezing there at times. But let's move on. My next question says this. Which city had the highest minimum temperature as well as the highest maximum temperature? Okay, so who had the highest minimum? The highest minimum was had by Harare. Very close to New Delhi, but let's look at New Delhi. New Delhi's minimum was 13 degrees. Whereas Harare's minimum is 14 degrees. If we look at the maximum, Harare's maximum is up here at 29 degrees. New Delhi's pretty high, but they're high at 27. So you know what? Harare has a highest maximum temperature as well as the highest minimum temperature. So my answer then is Harare. Next question. Determine the temperature range for Amsterdam. Can you see now what's beginning to happen? We're dealing with graphs, we're looking at graph work, but suddenly now we throw in a bit of statistics. And it's in the section of statistics that we look at things like mean, median, mode, and the range. And now what we're saying, instead of saying Amsterdam's highest temperature is this and their lowest temperature is that, we're now giving you those figures on a graph. And we're saying, wait, from the graph, determine the range. So we're taking a bit of stats, but we're using the graph work to answer that. So let's do it. So we're going to say, right, we know that the range is going to be my highest minus my lowest. So Amsterdam's highest is right over here, 5, 6, 7, 8 degrees. Amsterdam's lowest is going to be minus 2 degrees. So we're going to say, right, we've got a higher temperature, which we said was 8 degrees, was it? Yep, 8 degrees, minus their lowest. Now, what's their lowest? Their lowest was minus 2 degrees. Now, folk, I'm going to stop you right here, because you know what? I say this to all my students. Paper 1 is one paper that you can get 100% for, because they're only testing basic concepts. So why doesn't every single student get 100%? Because they make so many careless mistakes. And here's a question. Where careless mistakes are just going to jump out, and I would say grab so many students out there and pull their 100% away from under them. Okay, why? Let's look. It's highest mark, or the highest temperature, minus my lowest temperature. Now, my highest temperature is 8, and my lowest temperature is minus 2. Can you see this? So it's 8. It's not going to be 8 minus 2, but it's 8 minus negative 2. And so many people would look at that, and so many people did look at that question last year and said, oh, this is so easy. 8 minus 2 is 6. Answer 6. It's not, hey? The answer is actually 10. Let's have a look. And again, guys, let's use our calculator to do it. Why not? So I'm going to say, right, I've got 8 minus negative 2 equals, there it is, 10. So my answer works out to being 10 degrees. That's the range of the highest minus the lowest. Horrible little trick here, okay? Trying to catch you out. Don't let the examiners do that to you. Right. Convert New Delhi's minimum temperature to degrees Fahrenheit using the following formula. Okay, first thing we've got to do is find out what is New Delhi's minimum temperature. So let's do that. Here's New Delhi's minimum temperature over here, and it strikes at 13 degrees. Okay, and it's 13 degrees Celsius. So let's do that, and we're going to say, right, the temperature in Fahrenheit is going to equal 1,8 times the temperature which we got was 13 degrees plus 32 degrees. Now, guys, let's do it with our calculator, because our calculator is automatically programmed to know it's got to do multiplication before it does addition. So 1.8 times 13 plus, and what was the plus? The plus was 32 degrees, plus 32 equals, and the calculator takes the whole thing, rams it around in its brain, and comes up with this answer, 55.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So we've got 55.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? Not very difficult. I mean, in a paper 1, what they could do is say, convert the following temperature to Fahrenheit. Now what we've done is we're asking you the exact same thing, but we're not telling you what the degrees are in Celsius. What we're doing is we're giving it to you on a graph. And so we're now mixing up the two different concepts. And they're not that hard, are they? Of course they're not. Let's look at another question. Totally different question. Again, guys, let's have a look at it. It's adapted from the November 2011 paper 1. Because it's paper 1, I'm not expecting things to be too difficult. Although I'll give you a little heads up. This question that we're going to look at now on a paper 1, it had some challenging little aspects to it. So let's have a look. All right. And it came from question 2.3 of last year's paper 1. Now, the graph below shows the cost of parking at a parking garage that is open 12 hours daily. The cost of the parking in the parking garage. Wait. This graph you see here in front of you, folk, we don't normally see a graph like this, or very seldom do we see a graph like this, but I love it. It's so exciting. Let's look. What this graph is actually saying is this. That if you are in the garage, and look at our axis, or our horizontal axis says number of hours parked, and our vertical axis is the cost in rands. Now, according to this, what I want to point out to you first, before we even focus on the graph, is this, that we can get a graph with an open circle and a closed circle. Now, the open circle means we're starting from after this point. Whereas a closed circle means we're starting from this exact point. Let me point out what I mean by that. Let's have a look at this without even looking at the question. Let's say I gave you a number line, and I had the number 2, 3, 4. And I gave you another number line, and again, we had the numbers 2, 3, and 4. And I did this. I colored in this little dot here, and I drew a line all the way to that 4 there and colored it in. Or I opened circle and I went all the way to 4 and a closed little circle. And then let's do it again, right? So we've got 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to close this circle, go all the way to 4, but leave it as an open circle. And then I'm going to do the whole number line again, 2, 3, 4, open circle to open circle with a line in between. Now, each and every one of those graphs means something slightly different. Let's see what it means. It means if I had to tell you all the numbers, okay, my numbers would include the number 2. It would include the number 3, and it would include the number 4. If I look at this next graph over here, the one below that, what it means is this. It includes the number 4, it includes the number 3, it does not include the number 2. But it's everything from 2 onwards. So it will be 2, 1, and 2, 2, and 2, 3, and 2, 4. It involves all my numbers, all the decimal numbers, everything, but not the number 2. From 2 onwards, up to 4 and including 4. My third graph means this, that my line or the set of numbers includes the number 2, but it does not include the number 4. So it stops at 4. So we're saying it includes 2, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, etc., right up to 3.9999999, but it doesn't include 4. Okay? My final graph, this one, saying this. This line represents all the numbers between 2 and 4. Doesn't include 2 and 4 because they're open circles. Do we understand that concept? Because if we understand that concept, then this next question is going to be absolutely wonderful. Let's look at it. So now what we're saying is this. We've got a garage, and we're going to park our car in the garage. And as you know, when you go into a parking garage, you've got to pay a certain amount of money for parking in that garage. And the longer you stay in that garage, the more money you're going to land up paying. So someone who just drives in, okay, spends an hour, is not going to pay as much as someone who goes into the garage, parks, and stays there for 7 or 8 hours because they got so much shopping to do. Something like my wife. So if I go in a shopping centre, I'm in there for 30 minutes, get what I have to and out. My wife goes in, and she's in there for 30 minutes plus an additional 8 hours. So it'll be 8 hours and 30 minutes. She's going to pay a lot more money for parking her car, even though it's in the same garage as what I parked in. And that's what this question is showing. And in fact, this is very interesting, because this question is showing this, that were I to park in this garage from 0 hours, okay, let's get a pen here we go, from 0 hours all the way up to 1 hour, I'm not paying anything, nothing. But from 1 hour through to 3 hours, I'm now paying something. Look at that. If I park exactly 1 hour, what am I paying? Well, I'm not paying anything. Why? If you look here, I've got a closed circle on the one. Here, I have an open circle on the one, which means I'm not paying anything for that 1 hour. But everything after that 1 hour, I'm paying. So if I park for 1 hour and 1 minute, I'm going to be paying. And what am I paying? I am paying 5, 6, 7 rand for parking. And I'm going to stay on 7 rand right up to and including, because it's shaded, 3 hours. If we move on now, we're going to see this, that between 3 hours and up to 4 hours, so it's not including the 3 hours, but if I park for 3 hours and 1 minute, all the way up to 4 hours, including that 4th hour, I'm going to pay. And what am I paying? I'm paying 10 rand. Let's look at one more example quickly. Between 5 hours and 6 hours, I won't pay 18 rand, but I will pay up to 6 hours. I'm going to pay 18 rand. There it is. If I parked exactly 5 hours, that's what I'm going to pay. It's going to be 15 rand. Do we understand how this graph's working? It's not a very basic, simple, easy graph. In fact, if I have to be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised it's in a paper one. But I'm sure the questions are not going to be that difficult. So let's get on to our very first question. What is the maximum time that you can park at the parking garage for free? Let's have a look at it. So for free, I can park up to 1 hour, because there's a closed circle on the one which says including that 1 hour, you stay for absolutely free. Okay. Now, my next question. If you pay 10 rand for parking, how long was your car at the parking garage? So here it is, 10 rand, and I'm paying 10 rand, anything after 3 hours and up to 4 hours. So it's from 3 hours and 1 minute, or even from 3 hours and 1 second actually, but let's say from 3 hours and 1 minute all the way up to and including 4 hours. And it's including 4 hours because we've shaded in that circle. Can you see that? Whereas the 3 hours, it wasn't shaded in. But 3 hours is shaded in down here, which means if I parked exactly 3 hours, I'm going to pay 7 rand. But anything after 3 hours, I'm going to be paying 10 rand. Okay. Next question. How much would you pay if you parked your car at a parking garage for 6 hours and 42 minutes? Let's have a look at that. 6 hours and 42 minutes. Well, here's 6 hours. Here is 7 hours. So 6 hours, 42 minutes is somewhere over here. And you can see anything from 6 hours, I'm going to pay 20 rand. Okay. Next one. How much would you pay if you park for exactly 3 hours? They're trying to trick us now. But they're not going to trick us, are they? Because I've explained it and you've understood it. Let's look. 3 hours is over here. So I've either got that point or that point to consider. It can't be this point because there's an open circle. So it has to be this point over here because there's a closed circle. I'm paying 7 rand. Interesting. Nothing difficult about it, although the graph did look a little confusing when we first glanced at it. Guys, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and after we come back, I've got a phenomenal paper 2 question for us to look at. Welcome back, guys. We're busy looking at graph work, and we're now getting to the exciting stuff, a paper 2. Having said that, though, we've only got about 10 minutes left, so we really got to focus together now. So this is adapted from my November 2011 paper 2. Because there's paper 2, I know, guys, there's going to be a little bit of analyzing in this question. So let's read the question. Timothy is a newly qualified marketing graduate. He has been offered 2 positions. One as a medical sales representative for Meds SA, and the other as a tobacco sales representative for ABC Cigs. Okay, my goodness, that's 2 entirely different jobs, eh? One's trying to make sure you're healthy and the other one's trying to kill you. What a contrast, but let's go on. The formula for calculating the monthly salary for medical sales rep is given as follows. So salary is going to be 3,000 Rand plus 500 Rand for the number of days worked. Let's look at that. 3,000 Rand up front. So even if I don't work at all, right, so I don't go into work while I've had a bad month or whatever the case is, my salary is 3,000 Rand. Phenomenal. But were I to go actually into work, they're going to give me an extra 500 Rand for every day that I'm at work. So guys, you really want to go to work. So it's 3,000 Rand plus 500 for the number of days worked. As a tobacco sales representative, he will earn a salary of 750 Rand per day for each day worked in a month. He will only receive a salary if he works for 1 or more days in a month. Ah, now this is interesting, hey? Because what they're actually saying is this, that you are only going to get a salary if you come to work. Now, if he's a sales rep, he can sit at home and do absolutely nothing and be earning 3,000 Rand a month. But as a tobacco sales representative, he's got to come into work. And when he comes into work, he's going to get 750 Rand for every day. Now, write down a formula that can be used to calculate the monthly salary of a tobacco sales representative. Well, that's quite easy. We're going to say his salary is going to be 750 Rand times the number of days. Next question. Draw 2 line graphs on the same grid to represent the monthly salaries for both the positions of medical and tobacco sales reps. Clearly label each graph. Okay, so we're going to do a green graph and an orange graph. My first green graph is on my medical rep, 3,000 Rand plus 500 Rand for the number of days worked. So, if I don't work, now you'll see here my horizontal says the number of days worked, my vertical axis, the amount of money earned. If I don't do any work at all, so I don't even go to work, as a medical rep, I'm going to pull in 3,000 Rand a month. There it is right there. What happens if I work for 5 days? Well, if I'm working for 5 days, I'm going to get paid how much a month? A day? I'm going to get 500 Rand a day. So straight away, I'm going to say, okay, and my calculator's going to do this for me, 500 Rand multiplied by the 5 days. That gives me 2,500 Rand. But remember, this guy's getting upfront 3,000 Rand a month before he's even worked today. So besides the 2,500 he's earning, he's just earning 3,000. So we're going to say plus 3,000 Rand, and he gets an amount of 5,500. So we've got 5,500 Rand over at this point here. Let me just get my green pen. 5,500 right there. Okay, let's jump to 20 days and let's make a mark for 20 days. Now, guys, what you need to understand is this. What sort of graph am I going to get? I'm going to get a straight line, aren't I? Why? Because every day I work, I'm getting the same amount of money. I'm getting 500 Rand for every day I worked. And as soon as there's a constant value, I know constant value means a straight line. If I got 500 Rand for day 1 and 600 Rand for day 2 and 900 Rand for day 3, my graph's going to be doing all kinds of weird and wonderful things. But I'm getting 500 Rand a day, okay, plus the 3,000. So, 20 days. Let's have a look here. If I work 20 days, I'm going to say, right, we've got 20 days, and in those 20 days, I am getting 500 Rand for every one of them. It's 10,000 Rand. Plus my 3,000 Rand for starting, which is 13,000 Rand. So straight away, 13,000 Rand is over here. Let's just get 13,000 over there. Now we're going to draw a line. And we know it's going to be a straight line, so I'm going to try my best to draw a straight line. Here we go. Drawing a straight line, we're starting over here and we're going all the way, and there's my straight line. Now, by having drawn that straight line, I can read off that graph and read off any sort of weird and wonderful values. So I could say, well, how much is he going to be paid if he works for 10 days? So I'm going to say, all right, well, if he works for 10 days, here's 10 days, he's going to be paid that amount of money, which works out to 8,000 Rand. I could say to you, how many days has he worked if he earns 12,000 Rand a month? So I'd say, well, here's 12,000 Rand a month going across here. It clashes over there, which means it goes down here, which means he worked 15, 16, 17, round about 18 days worth of work. All right? But now I'm jumping ahead, hey? I haven't even been asked to interpret, but I'm already doing that because we know paper 2 is all about that interpretation. Guys, let's have a look now at our next graph. Our next graph, and I'm going to change color here. Let's look at using yellow for now, okay? So yellow, we are now going to draw a graph with 750 Rand a day. So what happens if this guy doesn't work at all? Let's say he wakes up and he says, this month I'm not going into work. How much is he going to earn? Well, no days means no pay, pal. Sorry, that's the way it works. What happens if he works 5 days? Well, it's quite simple. Our calculator is going to say to us, well, all you've got to do now is you've got to say 5 times 750, and we land up with 3,750 Rand. What happens if he works 10 days? Well, again, we're going to say 750 Rand times 10, and we get an answer of 7,500. Let's plot that down. 6,000, 6,500, 7,000. There we go. Plotting the point over here. We're using yellow. There it is. Okay? What happens if he works 20 days? Well, if he works 20 days, we're going to say 750 Rand times 20 days gives me 15,000 Rand. Okay, so we're going all the way up now to 15,000 Rand, which is this point over there. So now what we've got to do is we've got to join those two lines. So let's do that. Again, I'm going to use yellow, and I'm going to try and draw as straight a line as I possibly can from this point all the way up to that point. Okay. Now, from this graph, folks, there are a few things we can interpret. The first thing we can see is this, that for the first 10, 11, 12 days, it is better, or even for the first 11 days rather, it's better to use my green line. In other words, if I only intend to work for 11 or 12 days in a year, then I should rather be a medical rep. If I want to work for more than 11 or 12 days a month, rather, then it's better for me to be a tobacco rep. Why? Because look what happens. If I work 20 days and I'm now at a medical rep, I'm only going to get paid 13,000 Rand. However, if I am a tobacco rep, I'm going to end up getting 15,000 Rand for working the 20 days, okay? Because my yellow graph is higher than my green graph. But up to this point here, my yellow graph is lower than my green graph. And I'd rather be on the higher graph because that means more money coming in for me. Okay. Folk, I can't believe it, but time has come and time has gone. And there's so much work to do on graph work. May I encourage you to do this? Take last year's paper 1. Take last year's paper 2. In fact, even the 2010 and 2011 papers. And look for all the questions to do with graphs. And go through them and go through them. Go to your teacher. Say, this is what I've done. Can you help me? Have I done it correctly? Have I done it incorrectly? Please help me out. And you know what? That's the best way to learn. So go over past paper as many as you can. Guys, that's it from me. Thanks for joining us.